My name is Hilda. I'm 60 years old, and what I'm about to share will forever change the way you look at your own family. Just 3 days ago, my husband Henry and I were pushed off a 90-foot cliff by our own son Damien and his wife Melissa. As I lay shattered on the rocks, bleeding and gasping for air, I heard Henry whisper, "Hilda, don't move. Pretend you're dead." Those words probably saved my life. But even that wasn't the most horrifying part. The worst came moments later, when Henry revealed a secret that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. A secret buried for 25 years. For 4 decades, Henry and I had built what I believed was a peaceful, ordinary life. Every morning, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled our little house while birds sang outside the window. I taught 2nd grade at the local school, and Henry worked in his carpentry shop, shaping wood with hands both rough and gentle. We raised 2 boys, Richard, our firstborn, full of laughter and light, and Damien, quieter, more reserved but loved just as deeply. On Sundays after church, we gathered around the oak table Henry had built himself. Richard would talk about becoming an engineer, while Damien mostly stayed quiet, staring at his food. Still, I thought it was just his nature, not a warning of what he'd become. Our lives were simple, beautiful even. I used to host family dinners where my sisters brought their children, filling the house with laughter. Henry and I would sit on the porch at night, dreaming about retirement, about finally seeing the ocean together someday. We had no idea that those peaceful evening walks were preparing us for the one that would almost kill us. Then, 25 years ago, everything changed. Richard, our golden boy, went missing one October night. We searched for him all through the night, only to find his body at the bottom of the river gorge. The police said it was an accident, that he must have slipped in the dark. I believed them. I needed to believe them, because the truth was too monstrous to imagine. After Richard's death, Damien changed. He became attentive, caring, almost too perfect. He helped with chores, comforted me when I cried. I thought it was his way of coping with grief. Now I know better. It was all an act, a mask carefully crafted to hide the monster underneath. But I didn't understand any of that back then. Not until decades later, when Damien smiled across our dinner table and suggested we change our will. The first step in a plan that nearly cost us our lives. Rehooked that day as I signed my name on the dotted line. I had no idea I was sealing my own death warrant. 6 months before the cliff, before the horror, Henry and I decided it was time to update our will. We'd spent our whole lives saving every penny, building something that would last. Between our small house, the bit of land my parents left me, and our modest savings, we had about $200,000. Enough to pass on to our children and grandchildren. When Damien suggested the idea, it seemed thoughtful at first. "Mom, Dad," he said with that easy smile of his, "you're getting older. It's smart to have everything in order." Melissa nodded beside him, her hand resting softly on mine. "We just want to make sure you're protected," she said sweetly. I thought it was love. Now I know it was calculation. Our lawyer Albert, a family friend for years, explained different options, trusts, inheritance divisions, and so on. Damien insisted we make him and Melissa our sole heirs. "We'll distribute everything fairly to the grandchildren," he promised. "And besides, you'll need us when you're older. It's just practical." Something about his tone unsettled me, but Henry, ever trusting, didn't question it. He believed our son was being responsible. I told myself to stop overthinking. After all, Damien had turned into such a devoted son. How could I suspect anything? We signed the papers that Tuesday. Melissa wore a green dress and hugged me tightly afterward. "Now we're officially a family forever," she whispered. Her perfume was sweet, sickly sweet, and even then something about it made me shiver. After that day, Damien and Melissa began visiting more often. But their visits felt different. They didn't come to share dinners or laughter anymore. They came with suggestions. "Mom, you should really sell this big house," Melissa said one afternoon, running her fingers across the furniture Henry had built. "We can help you find something smaller, easier to manage." I remember smiling politely while my stomach turned. This house wasn't just wood and paint. It was 40 years of love. Every corner held a memory. Every wall had heard our laughter. But when I said I wanted to stay, Damien's eyes flashed with something cold. "You're being unreasonable, Mom," he said sharply. "If something happens to you, we won't be able to help in time." It was the first time my son ever spoke to me that way, with irritation instead of affection. And that was the moment something deep inside me woke up. That night, as Henry brushed his teeth, I asked, "Don't you think it's strange how obsessed Damien's become with our money?" He smiled faintly. "He's just being practical, Hilda. He cares about us." But I saw it in his eyes, that flicker of doubt he didn't want to admit. Rehook, if only I had known then that doubt in Henry's eyes was the first crack in the perfect mask Damien had worn for 25 years. The tension in our home grew thicker with every visit from Damien and Melissa. Their smiles were polite, their hugs warm, but beneath it all was something rehearsed, something that didn't feel like love. One evening, Damien arrived with papers in hand. "Mom, Dad," he said cheerfully, "I've been thinking, it might be best if I had power of attorney, just for precaution. That way, if anything happens, I can handle your finances smoothly." Melissa stood in the kitchen, pouring tea like she owned the place. "It's really the safest way," she added, her tone dripping with false concern. My heart pounded. Every instinct screamed that something wasn't right. That night I couldn't sleep. Henry lay beside me, breathing steadily, but I knew he was pretending. I could feel his unease too. The next morning I called my sister, Harriet. She listened quietly as I told her about Damien's insistence on controlling our money. When I finished, she said in a low, worried voice, "Hilda, doesn't that strike you as strange? Damien's doing fine financially, isn't he? Why does he need control of your accounts?" Her question echoed in my mind like a bell. Why indeed? That evening, when Damien came by again, I confronted him. "Son," I said carefully, "why is this so important to you? Your father and I are still capable of managing our own affairs." For the first time, his expression hardened. "Mom, this isn't about control," he said through clenched teeth. "It's about responsibility, family duty." But the way he said family duty made it sound more like a threat. After they left, Henry and I argued. He told me I was imagining things. But as we stood by the sink washing dishes, I saw something shift in his eyes, guilt. "Hilda," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper, "there are things about Richard's death I never told you." My heart stopped. I turned to him, trembling. "What are you talking about?" Henry sank into a chair, covering his face. That night, Damien wasn't in his room. I followed him. I saw him arguing with Richard near the gorge. They were shouting about money, about the inheritance. His voice cracked. And then, Damien pushed him. I thought it was an accident. He swore it was. I helped him cover it up. The room spun around me. 25 years of lies, of dinners, of smiles, all poisoned by that truth. Henry continued, tears in his eyes. "Damien's business is collapsing, Hilda. He owes more than $100,000. If we don't stop him, he'll destroy us too." Before I could respond, the phone rang. It was Damien. His voice was cheerful, but now I knew better. "Mom, Dad," he said, "we were thinking, why not celebrate your 40th anniversary with a trip to the mountains this weekend? A family hike, some pictures, something special." Henry and I locked eyes, cold dread flooding through us. Rehook, that was the moment we realized. Our son wasn't inviting us to celebrate our marriage. He was inviting us to our own execution. The days leading up to the anniversary trip were a nightmare. Henry and I smiled through every conversation, pretending to be excited while knowing full well what Damien and Melissa had planned. On Wednesday, Melissa arrived carrying grocery bags. "I bought snacks for the hike," she said cheerfully, showing me cookies, fruit, and bottled water. "It's going to be a day you'll never forget." Her words sent chills down my spine. I wanted to scream at her to leave, but I forced a smile instead. Damien followed her in, holding a brand new hiking backpack. "I got all the safety gear," he said. "Ropes, lanterns, a first aid kit, everything we need." Everything they needed to make our deaths look like an accident. That night, Henry sat me down in the living room. His face was pale, his voice low. "We can't avoid going, Hilda. If we cancel, they'll find another way. Maybe something worse. But I'll record everything on my phone. Every word, every sound. If we don't make it, someone will know the truth." He was right. There was no safe choice, only a way to prepare. On the morning of the trip, Damien arrived whistling, his smile bright enough to fool the devil himself. "Ready for your big day, Mom?" he said. I nodded, clutching Henry's hand as if it were my last lifeline. The 2-hour drive to the mountains felt endless. Melissa sang along with the radio, her voice light and happy, while I silently counted every curve in the road. When we arrived, the air was crisp and cold, the kind that makes you feel alive. Except I was certain I wouldn't leave that mountain breathing. We started the hike slowly. Melissa took photos of trees and flowers, laughing while Damien walked behind us, close enough that I could feel his presence at my back. Each time I turned, he smiled that same lifeless smile that haunted my nightmares. After about an hour, Melissa pointed toward a cliff that overlooked the valley. That spot looks perfect for a photo, she said. I knew then that was the place. The climb was steep and dangerous. My legs trembled and Henry was gasping for air. At the top, the view stretched for miles. Now smile, Melissa said, holding up her camera. Henry and I stood near the edge as Damien moved behind us. One step back, he said softly. Just a little, so the landscape fits in the frame. We stepped back. And then I felt it, the shove. For a split second, I heard Melissa's voice. Smile. This is your last photo. Then the world disappeared beneath us. Rehook as we fell, I didn't just see the ground rushing up. I saw the truth of every lie Damien had ever told, coming to meet me at the bottom. The days leading up to the anniversary trip were a nightmare. Henry and I smiled through every conversation, pretending to be excited while knowing full well what Damien and Melissa had planned. On Wednesday, Melissa arrived carrying grocery bags. I bought snacks for the hike, she said cheerfully, showing me cookies, fruit, and bottled water. It's going to be a day you'll never forget. Her words sent chills down my spine. I wanted to scream at her to leave, but I forced a smile instead. Damien followed her in, holding a brand new hiking backpack. I got all the safety gear, he said. Ropes, lanterns, a first aid kit, everything we need. Everything they needed to make our deaths look like an accident. That night, Henry sat me down in the living room. His face was pale, his voice low. We can't avoid going, Hilda. If we cancel, they'll find another way. Maybe something worse. But I'll record everything on my phone. Every word, every sound. If we don't make it, someone will know the truth. He was right. There was no safe choice, only a way to prepare. On the morning of the trip, Damien arrived whistling, his smile bright enough to fool the devil himself. Ready for your big day, Mom? He said that I nodded, clutching Henry's hand as if it were my last lifeline. The 2-hour drive to the mountains felt endless. Melissa sang along with the radio, her voice light and happy, while I silently counted every curve in the road. When we arrived, the air was crisp and cold, the kind that makes you feel alive. Except I was certain I wouldn't leave that mountain breathing. We started the hike slowly. Melissa took photos of trees and flowers, laughing while Damien walked behind us, close enough that I could feel his presence at my back. Each time I turned, he smiled that same lifeless smile that haunted my nightmares. After about an hour, Melissa pointed toward a cliff that overlooked the valley. That spot looks perfect for a photo, she said. I knew then that was the place. The climb was steep and dangerous. My legs trembled and Henry was gasping for air. At the top, the view stretched for miles. Now smile, Melissa said, holding up her camera. Henry and I stood near the edge as Damien moved behind us. One step back, he said softly. Just a little, so the landscape fits in the frame. We stepped back. And then I felt it, the shove. For a split second, I heard Melissa's voice. Smile. This is your last photo. Then the world disappeared beneath us. Rehook as we fell, I didn't just see the ground rushing up. I saw the truth of every lie Damien had ever told, coming to meet me at the bottom. In the hospital, I lay motionless under the fluorescent lights. I could hear everything, the doctors, the machines, the soft footsteps, and then the voices I dreaded most. Can we see them? Damien asked. The doctor hesitated, then agreed. Moments later, I felt Damien's hand on mine. Mom, he whispered, voice trembling with false affection. I love you. I'm so sorry this happened. Melissa leaned in. You've been like a mother to me, Hilda, she said softly. Then Damien's tone changed, quiet, venomous. You should have never asked so many questions, Mom. Some truths are better left buried, like Richard. My blood turned to ice. He'd confessed, right there in front of a nurse. That nurse, a young woman named Inns, froze beside my bed. She'd heard every word. As Damien and Melissa left, she leaned close and whispered, "If you can hear me, move your finger." I did. Her eyes widened. "You're awake. And they did this to you, didn't they?" 3 small movements of my finger. Yes. Minutes later, she returned with the head doctor and 2 police officers. "Ma'am," the officer whispered, "you're safe now. We know the truth." When I finally opened my eyes, I told them everything: the will, the lies, the push, the recording. Henry's phone had captured it all. Damien and Melissa were arrested right there in the hospital lobby. They screamed, they lied, they blamed each other, but it didn't matter. The evidence spoke louder than their words. At the trial, I faced my son across the courtroom. I told the jury everything, from Richard's death to that final shove on the cliff. When I finished, I looked Damien in the eyes and said, "My son died the night he killed his brother. The man sitting there is a stranger I never want to see again." The jury took 3 days. Their verdict: guilty of murder and attempted murder. Damien and Melissa were sentenced to life in prison without parole. A year has passed since that day. Henry and I are still healing body and soul. We've adopted our grandchildren, Damien's children, to give them a life built on truth, not lies. Every night when I tuck them into bed, I tell them about their Uncle Richard, the brother they'll never meet, but who still protects us in spirit. Because sometimes the dead don't haunt us to scare us. They haunt us to make sure justice is done. Final rehook and justice, after 25 years of silence, finally came crashing down like the fall that was meant to end us. The courtroom was silent when I took the stand. Every step I made toward the witness chair felt heavier than the last. Across the room sat Damien, my son, and beside him Melissa. They looked smaller than I remembered, swallowed by the weight of their crimes. When the prosecutor asked me to describe what happened that day on the mountain, I spoke calmly. I told them about the hike, the false smiles, the camera, and the shove. I told them about Henry's whispered warning, "Play dead," and how it saved our lives. The jurors listened wide-eyed as I described how our own son plotted our deaths for money. Damien never looked at me while I spoke. He stared at the table, jaw tight, pretending to be ashamed. But I saw through it. There was no remorse there, only anger that his plan had failed. When I finished my testimony, the defense lawyer tried to twist my words. He claimed Damien and Melissa were under financial stress, that the tragedy was a moment of panic. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "That's not panic. That's murder." They planned it for weeks. They packed ropes, maps, even practiced their story. My voice broke, but I didn't stop. They killed my firstborn, Richard, 25 years ago, and then they tried to kill us. If this is what desperation looks like, then God help us all. When I stepped down from the stand, I could barely walk. Henry reached out, his hand trembling, and whispered, "You were brave." The trial dragged on for weeks, filled with lies, fake tears, and half-truths. But the evidence, the recording, the confession in the hospital, the forged documents, it all spoke for itself. When the verdict came, the courtroom went silent again. We, the jury, find the defendants guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. Melissa began to sob. Damien just sat there, frozen, disbelief on his face. For a moment, I thought I saw the frightened boy he once was, before greed turned him into something unrecognizable. Henry and I held each other as the judge read the sentence. Life in prison, no parole. It should have felt like victory, but instead, it felt like standing over a grave that would never close. Rehook, because when your own child becomes your enemy, even justice feels like another kind of loss. A year has passed since the trial, but the echoes of that nightmare still live inside me. Some nights I wake up gasping, hearing Damien's voice whispering, "Smile, this is your last photo." Henry and I are slowly rebuilding. The scars on our bodies have faded, but the ones in our hearts still burn. Our home, once filled with laughter, now feels quieter but safer. We've adopted Damien's 2 children. They're too young to understand what happened, and we've decided not to tell them, not yet. To them, we're just Grandma and Grandpa, and this house is their safe place. When I watch them play in the yard, I see the childhood that Richard never got to finish, and I silently promise him that his spirit will live on through them. Sometimes I still see my son's face in my dreams, not the man who tried to kill me, but the little boy who used to run through the garden with scraped knees, shouting for my attention. I wonder when that boy disappeared, and when the darkness took his place. One afternoon, Detective Johnson came by to check on us. They've both settled in at the state penitentiary, he told me. No chance of appeal. It's over. I nodded, but part of me knew it would never really be over. Evil like that doesn't vanish. It lingers like smoke after a fire, reminding you of what burned. Before he left, the detective paused. You know, Mrs. Black, he said softly, most people don't survive what you did, not physically, not emotionally. You didn't just live, you won. That night, as I tucked my grandchildren into bed, I whispered the same words I used to tell Richard long ago. Good night, my loves. You are safe and you are loved. Then I stood by the window looking at the stars. Somewhere up there I hoped Richard could see us. His parents still standing, his nieces and nephews laughing, the truth finally out. Because in the end, this story wasn't just about death or betrayal. It was about survival. About refusing to let evil write the last chapter of my life. Final rehook/closing line. They tried to bury us at the bottom of that cliff, but instead we rose from it. Proof that even in the darkest betrayal, love can still find a way to live again. It's strange, really, how life goes on after something like that. You expect the world to stop, for everything to change, but the sun still rises, the coffee still brews, and the mail still arrives every morning. It's just you who's different. Sometimes I walk past Henry's workshop. The smell of sawdust still lingers there, mixed with the scent of varnish and old memories. His tools hang neatly on the wall, just as he left them. The sound of his hammer once filled this house, now it's replaced by the laughter of our grandchildren. That laughter is what keeps us alive. Every Friday we visit Richard's grave. Henry brings wildflowers, the same kind he used to pick for me when we were young. We tell Richard about the kids, how they're growing, how they smile the way he used to. I tell him that his little brother's children are safe now, far away from the poison that once surrounded them. Sometimes I wonder if forgiveness is possible. Can a mother ever truly forgive her child for trying to take her life? I've prayed on it, cried over it, and some days I think I've found peace. Other days I feel the old anger return like a storm cloud on the horizon. But I've learned something through all of this. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the darkness win. The reporters still call occasionally, wanting interviews, updates, the exclusive follow-up to the story they named the family at the edge of the cliff. But I always say no. I don't want fame. I don't want pity. I just want quiet, the kind of peace that can only come after surviving your own ending. Henry says I've become stronger. Maybe he's right. I don't see myself as a victim anymore. I'm a survivor of lies, of grief, of betrayal that should have destroyed me. Every night, I sit on our porch beneath the stars, holding a cup of tea and listening to the wind move through the trees. It's the same porch where Henry and I once dreamed of our future. The same porch where I used to imagine growing old surrounded by family. And in a way I still am. Just not the family I expected, but the one that's left, the one that truly matters. Because when everything you thought you knew collapses, what's left behind is what's real: love, truth, and the quiet strength to start again. Final reflection: I used to believe our story ended at the bottom of that cliff. But I see now it wasn't the end at all. It was the beginning of who I was always meant to be. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges of pain. It's been 3 years since that day on the mountain, and though the scars remain, they no longer define me. Sometimes I catch myself touching the faint line on my arm, the one left by the rocks as we fell. It's strange how such a small mark can hold the memory of everything. The fear, the betrayal, the impossible will to live. Henry and I rarely speak about Damien anymore. His name hangs in the air like a ghost we both pretend not to see. Not out of hatred, but because saying it aloud makes the wound fresh again. We've learned to coexist with the silence. Our grandchildren are growing fast. They ask about their parents sometimes, their innocent eyes full of questions I can't answer yet. "Grandma," little Lily asked me once, "why don't Mommy and Daddy live with us?" I smiled gently and said, "Because sometimes people lose their way. But we're here now, and we'll always be here." She accepted it with a child's simplicity, hugging me tightly, and in that moment I realized something. Love can heal even the damage caused by blood. Every so often I receive letters from the prison. Damien writes them, though I rarely read past the first few lines. They start with "Dear Mom" and end with "Please for forgiveness." I don't know what to feel when I see his handwriting. Part of me aches for the boy he once was, the boy who built birdhouses in the backyard and called me Mama. But that boy is gone, replaced by a man who chose greed over love. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a single decision. It's a daily choice, to release the pain just enough so you can breathe again. Henry, bless his heart, keeps those letters in a drawer. For the kids, he says. One day, they might want to know who their father was. Maybe he's right. Maybe when they're old enough to understand, they'll need to see both sides of the story. The love and the darkness that shaped their family. I'm not sure I'll ever forgive Damien fully, but I've stopped letting his actions steal the peace that Richard, Henry, and I fought so hard to reclaim. Because in the end, forgiveness isn't about setting someone else free. It's about freeing yourself from their shadow. This morning I woke before sunrise. The sky was painted with soft pinks and golds, the world still quiet except for the hum of the wind. I made a cup of tea, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and stepped onto the porch. Henry joined me a few minutes later, limping slightly but smiling. "It's beautiful today," he said, and I nodded. We stood in silence watching the light spill across the horizon. A light I never thought I'd live to see. For years, I feared that the story of my family would always be one of tragedy. But now I see that tragedy was only part of it. The other part, the greater part, is survival. It's the strength to rebuild, the courage to protect what's left, and the will to love again despite everything that tried to destroy you. Richard's old photo sits on our mantelpiece. His smile hasn't faded, and sometimes when the sun hits the glass just right, it looks like he's glowing. "I think he'd be proud," Henry said softly. "Yes," I whispered. "I think he'd tell us we did the right thing." The world moves on, and so do we. The grandchildren's laughter fills our evenings, echoing through the same halls that once held grief. They've brought life back into this house. A reminder that innocence can outshine even the darkest past. I've stopped being afraid of cliffs. Every year, on the anniversary of that fall, Henry and I visit the same mountain. We stand at the edge, not in fear but in gratitude. We leave flowers there for Richard, and for the family we once were. And when the wind rises, I close my eyes and imagine his voice carried within it, saying, "It's over, Mom. You can rest now." I used to think surviving was about staying alive. But now I know, it's about finding meaning in the pain, light in the ashes, peace in the silence. So if anyone ever hears my story, I hope they understand this. Family can build you and family can break you. But the love that's true, the love that endures, is stronger than betrayal, deeper than blood, and brighter than any darkness. Final closing line: I was meant to die on that mountain, but instead I was reborn there. And this time I'm finally free. People often ask me, how do you move on after something like that? The truth is, you don't. You simply learn to live differently. Pain never really disappears. It changes shape, softens around the edges, becomes part of you. Like an old scar that doesn't hurt anymore, but never quite fades. For me, the scar is a reminder that I survived what should have killed me. Not just the fall, but the lies, the betrayal, the years of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Henry and I still have quiet days. Some mornings we sit at the kitchen table, sipping coffee in silence, both thinking about everything we lost, and everything we still have. There's no need for words anymore. After 40 years together, and a lifetime of storms, silence feels like peace. Our grandchildren fill the house with noise and light. Lily wants to be a teacher like I was, and little Jacob spends his afternoons building toy furniture with Henry's old tools. Sometimes I catch him humming, the same tune Richard used to hum in his father's workshop. I take it as a sign that life, in all its mystery, finds a way to continue. Once a month we receive updates from the prison. Damien and Melissa are alive, serving their sentences separately. I don't hate them anymore. I can't. Hate is too heavy to carry for the rest of your life. Instead, I pray for them, not out of mercy, but because I refuse to let their darkness touch me again. I've learned something powerful through all this. Survival isn't about winning. It's about refusing to be destroyed. It's about waking up every morning and choosing love over bitterness, peace over revenge, and hope over despair. One day when I'm gone, I hope my grandchildren find these pages, the story I've written down in my own trembling hand. Not to relive the horror, but to understand the truth. That evil can wear the face of someone you love, but love itself is still stronger. Always stronger. Because if my life stands for anything, let it stand for this. That no matter how far you fall, no matter who betrays you, and no matter how dark the world becomes, there is always a way to climb back toward the light. Final line. My name is Hilda Black. I was pushed to my death and yet somehow I lived. And now I tell my story not for revenge, but so no one ever mistakes silence for weakness again. Even after justice is served, the shadows never truly disappear. Some nights I still wake up hearing the echo of that scream. The moment Damien pushed us. It's strange how your mind can replay a single second for the rest of your life. Henry says I talk in my sleep sometimes. I whisper, don't move. Play dead. Those words, the ones that saved me, became my curse. But I've learned something since then. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live alongside the pain without letting it define you. After the trial, we moved away from our old town. Too many memories lingered in every corner. The church where Richard's funeral was held. The cafe where Damien once took me for Mother's Day. The street where neighbors used to wave with smiles that turned to pity after the news broke. We bought a small cottage near the edge of a lake. It's quiet here. Peaceful in a way that feels almost sacred. Every morning I walk along the water, watching the sun rise, and I thank God for another day. Not because life is perfect, but because I'm still here to live it. Sometimes I sit on the porch with Henry and we talk about Richard, how his laughter used to fill the house, how his kindness was endless. We never speak of Damien, but his presence hangs in the pauses between our words. The son we lost to greed. The child I still grieve though he's alive. One afternoon I received a letter from the prison. It was Damien's handwriting. Shaky, uneven. He wrote, I think about that day every night. I don't know what came over me. I see Richard in my dreams and I can't breathe. I'm sorry, Mom. I wish I could take it back. I didn't reply. Not because I hate him, but because some words don't deserve an answer. Forgiveness can't erase what's been done. It can only stop the wound from spreading. When I finished reading, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a wooden box Henry made decades ago. The same box that holds Richard's childhood drawings. It felt right somehow. One son's innocence beside another's guilt. Rehook because even in silence the past still speaks. And sometimes the loudest forgiveness is the one you never say out loud. Tonight, the sky is clear, the kind of night where the stars look close enough to touch. I'm sitting on the porch again, wrapped in Henry's old sweater, a cup of tea in my hands. Inside, our grandchildren are asleep, their laughter still echoing faintly in the walls. It's in these quiet hours that I reflect on everything. The love, the loss, the lies, the survival. Life has taken so much from me. But it's also given me something rare, the truth. I used to think truth was something that set you free. Now I know it's heavier than that. Truth anchors you. It keeps you grounded when the world tries to convince you that the lie was easier. If you ask me whether I'd change anything, whether I'd undo the pain, erase the betrayal, I'd want to say yes. But deep down I know the answer is no. Because without the darkness, I'd never have discovered my strength. Richard's photo sits by the window, framed in soft light. His smile hasn't faded. Sometimes I feel him here. In the wind that rustles the trees, in the laughter of the children, in the way Henry's hand still finds mine after all these years. Tomorrow marks 5 years since the fall. Henry and I will visit the mountain again. We'll leave flowers where we landed, not as a reminder of what almost destroyed us, but of what rebuilt us. Before bed, I take out a blank page and begin to write. If anyone finds this story someday, know this: love can survive betrayal. Strength can rise from ruin. And no matter how deep you fall, you can still find your way back to the light. I sign my name slowly, the ink trembling from my hand, Hilda Black. Then I close the notebook and place it beside the box of letters. My story is complete. I turn off the porch light, take one last look at the stars and whisper, "Thank you, Richard. You can rest now. We're safe." Final line. And as the wind carries his memory through the trees, I finally understand. I wasn't spared just to survive. I was spared to remember.